position today. Speaking of cars near the back, we're on board with Aurelian Mall, the last running car in that sole remaining gilet. Not really looking like he's going to be able to make a difference himself. He will just have to sit back, let everyone else run their race, run his own race, and see where that gets him, because it doesn't look like he will be progressing beyond 13th place unless attrition plays a hand. Marco Bizzarri actually started to look quite racy in catching Barry Mori, so really not any scope for Mull to do anything from his end today. The gap for the race lead is slowly but surely coming down now. It was not a great pit stop from the Kellerop guys, which I suppose is to be expected when they are such a young team. Of course, 1 year less experience in the sport than the Fusion team that runs Terry Hawkin, the lead car right now. Looking back to Philippe Nicolas in that MRT, a little bit of a gap now to Marco Bizzarri again, a second or so. It'll be interesting to see whether Marco attempts one of those cheeky moves down the inside again, especially with Daniel Melville approaching now in the background. Nicola actually maybe needs to get his skates on if that gap does go. Oh my goodness, Van der Venhoytsen's run wide into the wall! He's gone and done almost the same thing that Hawkin did at the beginning of the race. Can he get it out of the barrier, or has he done permanent damage to his car? He's still not moving at the moment. Looking for reverse. Is he going to be able to find it? He's just stopped and he's not moving at all. Is that terminal damage to the Kellerop car? He's finally been able to find reverse to get it out of the wall. But how much longer is he going to be stuck there waiting to find the right gear to get moving again? He's reversed a bit too far there. Well, very far in fact. That didn't seem like quite the right course of action there. A little too far back with his reverse manoeuvre. I wonder if the stewards might take a look at that. That, unfortunately, may be it for the race lead battle in that case. Hawkin now with a huge 25-second lead, and the only man up front on that two-stop strategy, the one-stopper of Nicola. He might be one stop less, but he's so far behind he's not going to be able to compete for the win. Unless we have Hawkin making a mistake or his car expiring on him. It looks like now, with that mistake, the race win is settled, unfortunately for us, the viewers. A real shame there. Bastian van Nieuwenhuizen up to that point looking really impressive, looking like a man who had done this for quite some time, but there we go, the proof that he is indeed a rookie. Really quite amateurish error. In fairness, Hawkin did do the same thing with far smaller consequences, and I suppose it's not quite as bad as all those other drivers who have stuck it into the wall at the exit of the pit entry, but nonetheless not a great incident for Bastian van Nieuwenhuizen there. Again, we look at the gaps, and Daniel Melville in the lead Yamaha creeping ever so slightly closer to Philippe Nicolas, so at least some progress from the Aussie driver, albeit at the rate he's catching at the moment, probably not enough to make the strategy he's on work for him at the moment. And of course he still has to get past Marco Bizzarri before he can even have a go at Philippe Nicolas, so not looking too good for the Aussie driver in his quest for a podium. Looks like he may have to settle for fourth at the moment. Does seem to have the measure of Jean-Luc Schiller, who again is on that two-stop strategy. Hawkin, meanwhile, being sensible and biding his time to go past Lucarelli. Doesn't want to try something too early and risk ending up on that wall like so many others have before him. I tell you what though, that was awfully kind of Marco Bizzarri, just lets him straight through. I wonder if there's any reason behind that, because he made life very difficult for Philippe Nicolas on the MRT, but absolutely made every effort possible to get out of the way of Daniel Melville. Quite a contrast there. At the moment on board with race leader Terry Hawkin. As we switch back to Pizzari, who's actually having a go at the man he just let through. That really doesn't make a lot of sense. You saw him go offline and make a very clear effort to get out of the way of Daniel Melville, and then decides to have a go at him later in the lap. Very odd behaviour there from the Italian. Not quite sure what his priorities are at the moment. Maybe just trying to make himself look a little racy to justify his drive. Who knows what he's thinking. Very interesting to find out what he's doing. On board with Alessandro Lucarelli in the Venturi now. A little bit of a gap to the Fusion of Terry Hawkin, who is of course a lap ahead, so not really in the same race. Here is Bastian van der Venhoetzen coming up to Barry Mori. Be interesting to see how quickly he's able to lap in. Sorry, that wasn't Mori. That was the last remaining Rosenforth Holden of Gregor Pascal. Very anonymous driver. It's first time, well, the second time today I've mentioned him in total, I think. Pascal, well, at least you can say he's sort of been solid, quiet and anonymous in a race like this. That's probably a good thing. Just keeping himself to himself, letting the car tick over. 10th at the moment, looks in a good position to capitalise if there is further attrition, because it does seem like if there is attrition, it may not be him that suffers, given he has been solid, if underwhelming so far. And would you look at that, it's lap 62 of 124, the halfway mark. Keep an eye out then for Philippe Nicolas making his first and presumably only stop of the race relatively soon. Will be interesting to see where he comes out after that. Looking at the current gaps, you'd have to say it's maybe around Alessandro Lucarelli, which is pretty much where he was before, as Bastian van der Venhoetzen almost locks up going into the hairpin again. Needs to be careful not to get too carried away with trying to make up for lost time. He has made up a few seconds already, the gap down to 21 seconds, having been as high as 25-26 immediately after making that mistake. So clearly a little faster than Terry Hawkin at the moment, and looking to make amends for his mistake. Might be a bit too late to do that now. We do have still 61 laps to go, which may be a lot, but it's 61 laps of a very short lap of only 44-45 seconds. In theory, if he's able to take half a second a lap out of it, it's possible. It's possible. 40 laps, 45 laps, he could catch up to Hawkin. But it's going to be a very tough ask. Especially expecting him to be half a lap faster, lap in, lap out from now until the end. It would give him about 10 or 15 laps to try and get the job done. But again, very dependent on strategy, very dependent on how the second set of stops go, whether Killerop can up their game and get his car turned around much faster than last time. That slow stop, of course, costing him the lead, at least partially, if not entirely. Certainly one to watch for. Keep an eye on that gap and watch whether it goes down further or stays roughly the same. Everything looking pretty solid now. Everyone settling down to their routines. Everyone now into a good rhythm. Very few, well, so few cars, only 13 remaining. There is of course less chance of seeing mistakes happen, and it seems everyone's finally found that rhythm they need to be in to try and reach the finish. Now this should be interesting. Daniel Melville in the lead. Kama is finally coming up to and about to lap teammate Barry Mori. Now, we know Barry has a little bit of an ego to him, and I'm not too sure he's going to be particularly happy about his rookie, inexperienced, not particularly well rated teammate either, it has to be said. Very few people really making much of Daniel Melville as a talent in the sport. Everyone focused on the younger guys like Hawken, like Van Nieuwenhuizen, and even to a certain extent Lucarelli, who has been reasonably good in the last few races. Daniel Melville, on the other hand, really hadn't shown particularly much of interest until this moment, and here he goes, about to take the but lap his teammate, and Barry Murray does swiftly get out of the way. So actually my point is made invalid, and Murray does show he has a bigger man to him than we all expected him to. So there we go, that's point of discussion very quickly put to bed by the Japanese driver. Allows his teammate on a different strategy in a much better position as well to go through without any fuss, doing the good order for the team. That was awfully dangerous there by Philippe Nicola, taking that particular moment to go past Bizzarri, which almost forced the Italian into the wall there. Had to slam on the brakes to make sure he didn't end up sans a right rear wheel like so many others before him. Ooh, Pascal locking up into the hairpin there. I was saying earlier he was nice and anonymous and keeping it clean, but maybe not quite so after all. A little bit enthusiastic there, just snatched at the brake and running wide. Thankfully, not really anyone around him to capitalise on that error. He'll lose a couple of seconds, but nothing else. No positions at risk, certainly. All the way down in 10th place, and no sign of Shinobu Katayama further up the road, and decent enough gap to Barry Murray in 11th. Here we are again with the race leader, Terry Hawken. Again, gap ever so slightly coming down to Bastian van Nieuwenhuizen as said driver goes past the Simpson of, I believe that would be Boivolov being lapped again. As there is Philippe Nicola coming into pit lane for what you would presume is his one and only stop of the afternoon. We're already at lap 70, so certainly wouldn't make any sense for him to be doing a two-stop. So his final stop of the afternoon. Let's see where he exits. He's already exited. He's down in 7th, behind Mastilio, but ahead of Alexei Boivolov by the looks of it. I don't think that's going to change. He is showing as having exited the pit lane, so I think that's where he'll be now. Hard to see where he is when the lap counter shows him as a lap down, and we don't get to see the time differential to Daniel Melville, which is really his target for the afternoon. You've got to watch out for Jean-Luc Schiller as well. He's, despite the Simpson not quite having the pace of the cars around it, Schiller has just been able to hang on to that Yamaha of Daniel Melville. So of course you've got to be careful and take a look for him, because he might just be biding his time and leaving a nice fresh set for his final stint to try and capitalise, or maybe even go for the undercut if Simpson can make that work. Terry Hawken though, on board with him, looking straight down in his visor. Managing the gap reasonably well, although at the current rate of time lost to the Dutchman that we're looking at now, might find himself being caught up just before the end, but not much more, so just about doing what is required of him to make sure he manages the gap and make sure he comes across the line in first position. Of course, no real reason to push to maximum when you do have a lead of 20 seconds and are on a very similar strategy to your main competitor behind. Although that seemed a little ill-informed. They almost thought about going for the dive there to try and go past what I presume is Alexei Boivolov, given that looks like a... Oh no, that would be Schiller. That's Schiller and Melville up ahead of him now. Not many cars left for him to lap. Getting a little stuck behind the Simpson there, but Schiller goes to the side, lets him through, doesn't want any trouble, and sensibly so. He's got a podium to worry about, potentially at least.